Welcome back to the Gong Pod. Thanks for joining us for a little special ep this week. Obviously, Windang's own Alex Volkanovski. He's the featherweight champ once again, and we called in the big guns here for this, Arvo. We called in the man who actually got paid to follow him around all week in Miami, Niko Pajarillo, Fox Sports UFC reporter, NRL sideline reporter, mate. We were just talking off air. You've run down a bit after getting home.
A little bit. It was a fantastic week. First of all, Jazza, thanks for having me. Always great to have a chat and speak to the good people of the Gong. But yeah, it was a frantic week, and let me tell you, I'm glad that it caught up with me when I arrived rather than when I was over there, because it was pedal to the floor all week long, following Alex Volkanovski around, and UFC fight weeks, they can take it out of you.
Mate, tell me about fight week. So obviously you were over there in Miami for the whole week, following Volk around, following everyone else around. Just sort of tell us a bit about the week and sort of, I've never been to a UFC event, so sort of the atmosphere. Tell us a bit about it.
They do it unlike anybody else, Jazza. I kind of feel as though with the UFC being, the juggernaut that it is, they really have everything down pat. Everything, it works like it's like clockwork almost. Every part of the machine knows its role. So, from the very start of the week, you have your media day where you get your sort of one-on-one sit downs with everybody, and being able to chat to Volk, from then on, he just had this calmness the whole way through. And even chatting with him before we left Australia, he just had this sort of, he's very cerebral, very calm, very focused. And you got the sense, Jazza, that he didn't, like the pressure of the two losses, the two knockout losses, mind you, of the past year and a half, didn't affect him at all. He was kind of almost separating himself from that in a way that I don't imagine many other fighters were able to. So, being able to chat with him at the media day, speaking with him at the press conference, even after the weigh-ins, I went about it with this sort of quiet confidence that he could get it done. But the week was fantastic. I mean, with here at Fox Sports, not only do we like to kind of follow what the UFC has planned, but we also like to do some other stuff, get out and about. So we spoke to everybody that we could that screamed Miami. So, we spoke to Jorge Masvidal and asked him his thoughts on the fight and his thoughts on the wonderful city. He is Mr. 305 outside of, many others. Colby Covington as well. He took us through the fashion district. So, we spoke to anybody and everybody that we could about Miami and about what UFC 314 meant to the people and also to fight fans all across the world. And let me tell you, it culminated in a fantastic event, which I'm sure you're on the edge of your seat for.
Mate, it was quite the fight, wasn't it? I mean, like you're talking about Volk's mentality earlier, how calm he was. Realistically, like whether it was warranted or not, there was a lot of noise around his two losses or last two losses in particular, but sort of that calmness, that trusting in the process, that really separates sort of the good from the elite, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of feel like, Jared, that it's sort of characteristic of him in the sense that he's just, that sort of fits in with his demeanor perfectly. Like, I've known Volk since I think it might have been the first or second Max Holloway fight, right? When he had sort of just become champion, and then we sort of started getting him on the show. And, it took a little while, and I'm sure you remember, to get all the MMA populace on his side, everybody being a Max Holloway fan. I love Max Holloway, right? But for him to need to sort of fight through that and sort of overcome that adversity of maybe not being the most beloved fighter, he sort of just took it with a chip on his shoulder. And I wonder if this is sort of characteristic of people from Wollongong. In fact, I'm sure it is. They've just got this sort of this mentality of like, I'm not going to let that bother me. I know who I am. He's a family man. And you sort of get when you're over there in Vegas, people go, man, Volk must be this big superstar back home. He must, have the streets lining up to talk to him. And that is true, right? But I've always spoken to him, and he says, look, we don't come from these big gyms in America. We're not from American top 10, big gyms like that. I come from a small town called Windang.
Windang.
That's right. I'm from the Illawarra. I've got just local training partners who are world-class in their own way, but he's done it all without the bells and whistles. So you kind of just get the sense that when he was coming up against Diego Lopes, and all these questions were being asked of him, whether or not he'd be able to handle it, and whether or not those, the ghosts of those two losses would haunt him. You kind of went about it with this confidence, like I mentioned, that you know what, he's just so laid back. He's just this larrikin from the gong who doesn't really let anything get to him, and that's how he handled the week. That's how he handled the fight, and knew.
Yeah, and like it's sort of like UFC is such a sport where the personalities really sell fights, for example. But Volk, like you said, Volk's let his hands do the talking, basically. His hands, legs, whatever you want to call it. But he's let the fighting do the talking, and in particular down here, I think that's why he's so beloved.
Jared, the question that's posed to him a lot is, do you feel like you are the greatest featherweight of all time? And that sort of question's been asked of him basically since he beat Max for a third time. And his response always is, look, that's not up to me. That's up to the people to decide. But he always said that along the way, what he's most proud of, and he's constantly repeated this. You can go back to any interview that he's been asked this question. He goes, what I'm most proud of is that I was me the whole way through. I didn't pretend to be anyone else. I didn't pretend to be, Conor McGregor with, the swag and the suits and the glasses and the fancy cars and all that sort of stuff. He's just a dad with four kids now from Wollongong, from a small town, a humble family man who you'd see walking down at your local Woolies or Coles in his thongs going, "Hey, you going, mate? This and that." And I think that's what's endeared him so much to not only the Australian public, but the world. People all across the globe, from Europe, from the US, from Asia to Africa to the Middle East. Like everywhere he goes, Alex Volkanovski is beloved. I don't know anyone who dislikes him, maybe apart from a couple of Georgians and Spaniards, but that's another story to be told.
Like does Volk still live down here? That's sort of.
Yeah.
He's still down here and everything as well. Yeah. So like when you talk local, he's like local.
He's proper local. Yeah. He's moved. I think he's got a farm now. So he's been on the farm, but he's still very much in the area. So, expect to see him at the local shops or dropping his kids off or whatever. But yeah, he's, like I said, hasn't let anything change him. He hasn't let the stardom get to his head. And, that's why we love Volk, because despite all his achievements, all his accomplishments, and all his accolades, all the title fights that he's won, like I said, I think it's 7 title fight wins, 5 defenses. It's just unbelievable. One short of Jose Aldo's feats in the UFC. He hasn't changed one bit. And I think that's what makes him so beloved. And, long may it continue, because I don't see him changing anytime soon.
Yeah, you'll definitely probably see him down the Woolies somewhere, considering all his cooking ventures and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him more beloved as well. Just like you can tell, he's just got that Aussie sense of humor.
That's it. He's a larrikin, like I mentioned, and I think that's it wouldn't be out of place, right? Because I feel like people respect that in him as well. Like, I mean, maybe not so much when you go to big cities like Miami and that, but like I would imagine the good people of Wollongong listening to this show would agree. Like, you see Volk on the street, you acknowledge that, yeah, okay, he's this big superstar and that, but like he commands that respect because he is so respectful of everybody. And he's always had his town front and center of mind. People of the Illawarra know Volk, they praise Volk, but they also respect him with, a reverence that is, I feel is rare amongst UFC fans and also fighters these days. He's truly a class above, I think. And I'm sure you could speak to this as well. Like, of all the athletes that you meet, he's certainly unique in that sense.
100%. Mate, let's talk about the fight sort of in general, sort of break it down a bit. So that composure we've spoken about, did that stand out to you the most, or was there something else?
No, I think it did, right? So watching him in that first round, and I often say this, right? Whenever I watch Volk, and yes, I was confident this time around, but whenever I watch Volk or Rob Whittaker or Tai Tuivasa or any of our boys, and I'll be the same when Jack Della Maddalena faces Bilal Muhammad in a few weeks' time in Montreal, I feel this, I get really nervous and I turn into a bit of a pessimist. I'm like, oh, gee, what if, he gets caught with this? Diego, he's so strong. He's also a great submission threat. Or, even when he was fighting Islam, it's like, oh, gee, Islam was able to make such easy work of Drew Dober and Charles Oliveira. And so I turned into the biggest pessimist, right? Watching that first round put my mind at ease so much. That was, and I know it's been oft repeated in just about every interview he's done since then, but it was vintage Volk. It was vintage Volkanovski. His calmness, his distance management, his movement, like he was able to find his angles so well. And it was it was relatively boxing heavy, right? I mean, I know he shot north of 10 takedowns, only one of which came off, I believe. But he had several kicks as well in there, but just the way that he was able to mix the game up so well, and he was able to remain so composed, I feel as though that really put him in good stead for the rest of the fight. I mean, I might have had a minor heart attack in that second round when he was dropped with 10 seconds to go by a big overhand right from Diego Lopes. But other than that, yeah, he remained so calm, and that really, it reminded me of like UFC 290 or indeed UFC 276, just like a 5-round masterclass. I know 290 didn't go the distance, but it just felt like he was on for the whole 5 rounds. And yeah, an easy 4-1 victory for me. At worst, 3-2, but yeah, 4 rounds to one. The Volk remains king.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you, like, how nervous were you when he got knocked down as well? But for like Lopes, for example, for someone who's a casual, and I don't know, some locals might not know who Lopes was. Sort of tell us a bit about Lopes. Sort of, so Brazilian. Basically, he's on his own as well. He's sort of forged his own path, but super dangerous.
Absolutely, he is, and he's this guy that has been touted for a little while now. I don't want to say a long time, because the crazy thing is, and I said to him during the week, I said, Diego, it feels like only yesterday that we were talking about, have you seen this guy out of Brazil who's, absolutely tearing through the ranks? And, less than 2 years later, he's fighting for a title. Such is the skill of this young man. 29 years of age, 26 victories, 22 of them finishes, right? He's only gone to decision. Well, he's only won a decision 4 times. And that to me is remarkable. I mean, he arguably Movsar Evloev as well. So like, he's just this guy that the UFC has wanted to push, and rightfully so. He's so dangerous. He's so entertaining, and his game is so well rounded. Not only does he have 22 wins by finish on his record, but I think he almost had an equal balance of knockouts and submissions in those finishes. So he was just this guy that spelt real danger for Volk or anybody that he came up against. 29 years of age, and Volk, coming up against it in terms of the statistics, and of course that curse that was oft repeated. He now becomes the first fighter over the age of 35 at 155 pounds or lower to become a UFC champion. And that speaks volumes, right? I'm not even going to mention the Drake curse of him.
Oh, I was getting worried about that. Don't worry.
But no, he was able to buck the trend and to do it against a guy like Diego Lopes with the resume that he's been able to amass. I think makes it even more impressive.
And we can't exactly just glance over the fact that he's the first guy over the age of 35 to win, what was it, under 135, you're saying. It's like, seriously, like, unbelievable.
It is. It's often easier, and boxing fans will tell you the same thing. Statistically, it's appeared like easier for the bigger weight classes, because I don't want to say easier to secure a win when you're older in the heavier weight classes. But yeah, for Volk to be able to do it for the first time for anybody at lightweight or lighter is super, super impressive. And that was, I would say, Jared, the biggest talking point throughout the week. The fact that he is 36 years old, he's turning 37. Diego's 29, and he's so dangerous. And Volk, not that he doesn't have that knockout power. We've seen him produce some incredible finishes in the UFC, but he certainly doesn't have the finish rate that Diego Lopes does, not only on the feet, but on the ground as well. So 100% it makes it more impressive. Like, the old dog still got it.
Yeah. Well, he's played into it in the past, turning up to, I think, press conferences in like the old granny outfits and all that. Where would you rank this win? Like, compared to some of his big wins, obviously. Like, he's had some massive wins, obviously, but where does this one rank?
Well, okay, so there are 2 ways to approach this, Jared, right? I would say that from just looking at the fight, like removing all context from it, I think this was his hardest fought win over 5 rounds. Like, you look at his face, and we saw in my post-fight interview with him after they ran on Fox Sports News, I'd never seen him like that. His lip was swelling up. He'd had stitches in his mouth, 2 black eyes. I'd never seen him fight harder for a victory. And I know we can bring up the Brian Ortega fight at UFC 266, where he escaped the 2 submission attempts and nearly got finished. right? I would say that was probably the most heroic I've seen him. But in terms of facing adversity over the course of 5 rounds with such a dangerous opponent, this would be the most impressive in all his career. In all his fights dating back to his time on the local scene, Wollongong Wars. I would say that this is the most impressive or the most hard fought victory Volk has had to undergo. In terms of the context, I think it's difficult because like when you sort of zoom out a little bit and everything that we mentioned before, like fighting Max Holloway for a third time, you could say that was probably the crowning moment. That was the moment that made everybody sit up and realize, oh my gosh, maybe this guy is the real deal. Maybe we should start paying some respects to him. You could say that the loss to Islam Makhachev the first time around did more for his reputation and his regard than this victory did. However, I think the fact that he's had to come back from such adversity, and he has been very successful in the octagon over the weekend. I would say this is up there, if not one of the most impressive victories he's had. When you look at the context and zooming out of the whole picture.
Does this cement him as the featherweight GOAT, just undisputed now? No questions?
It's difficult because for me, I would say so. In the UFC, I would say so. With Jose Aldo, okay, I know he's one short of his accolades in the UFC, but I don't think, and I'll have to look this up once again, but I don't know if that includes his records in the WEC, in which case you'd have to look at Aldo and go, oh, gee, like that guy, like in the late 2000s and early 2010s was just unstoppable, right? And it's easy for, especially a sport like mixed martial arts that gained a lot of popularity amongst sort of younger viewers during the pandemic. It's very easy to fall victim to recency bias. And, as amazing as Volk is, and for me, if we're just looking at UFC records in the UFC, absolutely. I think he has eclipsed Jose Aldo. But, if we're looking at strength of career, I think there is still a question to be answered. But the good thing about that asterisk, Jared, is I don't think, he's not done yet. He's still got so much more to give at age 36, moving into 37. It's still so impressive. So, we'll see what happens. But I think if he doesn't retire if he isn't the featherweight GOAT now in all of MMA, I think he can be.
And that sort of brings me to a last little wrap up. Have you spoken to him? What's his plan next? Like, obviously not for the next couple of months, but he has gone on the record saying he still wants to be active, doesn't he?
So I want to say like a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, I went down to Windang and spoke to him at Freestyle MMA with his coach, Diego Lopes. And he was saying that, yes, I want to be active. I actually want to fight Movsar Evloev in 3 months' time right after this. Like, I'm keen to get back into it. I asked him about it once again after the fight. I'm like, is that still the plan? Because like you've just had a massive 5-round war. It looks like you've broken your hand and there's an issue with your foot as well. He goes, oh, look, I want to be active. But look, we'll see what happens. I think he might actually be eyeing International Fight Week in June or maybe a July date. But, I think I speak on behalf of a lot of Australians when I say, mate, just recover and make sure you're right to go for the next one. There's no sense rushing in there when, you put in so much work to ensure a successful comeback. But I think, isn't that just the most Volk thing you've ever heard, right? Oh, I want to get 2 more fights in this year. It's like, dude, you've just gone through the most brutal fight that we've seen in 2025. But that's Volk for you, I think, in a nutshell.
Yeah, mate, like June and July aren't that far away. It's just like, yeah, maybe put that one to the side. But like,
I think he beats Movsar Evloev. I think, as exciting as this guy is, he's undefeated, another hot raging prospect. I think he is a better matchup and an easier fight for Volk than Diego Lopes was. So, if he was to step in quickly against somebody, well, maybe Movsar Evloev is the right fighter. But look, we'll see what happens. There are plenty of options. Ilia Topuria has moved up to 155 pounds. He's made no secret of his desire to get that rematch and get that win back. So, you never know. It's exciting times for the career of Alex the Great.
100%. Well, mate, thanks so much for coming on and chatting a bit of Volk about us. I mean, any chance we get to glaze Volk, we will. And I'm sure you're exactly the same
I've
as
made
well.
an entire career out of that, Jazza, so don't worry about that.
What's the plan for you now? Have a couple of days rest and recovery, or?
Yeah, look, I'm going to take a few Codral I'm gonna just relax and ensure I get my voice back after this show. And yeah, I think it's all eyes turned to Montreal, and hopefully we can get over there to support our guy Jack, and maybe, who knows, it's 2 belts back to Australia within the space of 3 weeks. So wouldn't that be a hell of a story?
Be fantastic, mate. I'll put your voice on ice. Thanks for joining us.
Jazz, appreciate it, and thanks to all the people that have gone.